Very good evening to you. Thank you for making time for us on the big story this evening. So the big story this evening is the end of a tenure of Inspector General Joseph Boinnet. Remember, he's been at the helm for the last 4 years. So on the big story this evening, we'll be trying to look at his scorecard 4 years down the line. How has he performed as the Inspector General in the Republic of Kenya? So that's a conversation we're having in the next couple of minutes. But we want to touch base with what's going on in Ethiopia and get for you an update on the Ethiopian Airlines jet that crashed shortly after takeoff from Addis Ababa, killing all on board on Sunday. The flight recorders from the Ethiopian Airlines plane that crashed on Sunday have been recovered by investigators. The devices recovered from the crash site are the Boeing cockpit voice recorder and the digital flight data recorder. The plane en route from Addis Ababa to the Kenyan capital, Nairobi, crashed 6 minutes after takeoff, killing all 157 people on board. Several airlines have grounded the model following the disaster. Now, Ethiopia declared Monday a national day of mourning. Francis Ontomwa is in Addis Ababa for us. He's been covering this story for us. But before we get there, let's just create a perspective to what we know so far with respect to that crash.
Red Cross workers sift through the wreckage at the scene of the Ethiopian Airlines crash on Monday morning, collecting remains in plastic bags as an excavator dug at the site. The airline said on Monday that both the cockpit voice recorder and the flight data recorder have now been recovered. The Boeing 737 MAX 8 passenger jet bound for Nairobi crashed minutes after taking off from Ethiopian capital Addis Ababa on Sunday, killing all 157 people on board. It was the same model of aircraft involved in the Lion Air crash in Indonesia last year, costing 189 lives. As the investigation begins into what went wrong, experts have said that it's too early to say if there's a direct connection between the accidents. On Monday, Boeing said there was no need to issue new guidance to operators of its 737 MAX 8 aircraft, based on the investigation so far. But company shares took a hit in early trading, sliding 9%. China's civil aviation regulator has ordered its airlines to ground their Boeing 737 MAX 8 planes. That's more than a quarter of the global fleet of the jets. Ethiopian Airlines and Cayman Airways have also grounded the plane, even China was acting on, and said there were no plans to follow suit in the US.
Expressing our deepest condolences to
victims on board the crashed jet came from 33 different countries. Some of those were United Nations staff heading to Nairobi for the UN Environment Programme Assembly. Their absence was marked with a 1-minute silence at the start of the conference. While in Ethiopia, Parliament declared Monday a day of mourning.
All right, so that's the latest update that we have right now. I did mention that Francis Ontomwa is in Ethiopia. He's actually on his way from Bishoftu, southeast Addis. They've been on the road for the last hour and a half. He's trying to get to Addis and just give us the link from there. Let us know what he managed to uncover from the crash site. He's been there the entire day. So once we get a hold of Francis Ontomwa, we will be speaking to him to get the latest update from Ethiopia. That is a big story, not just for Kenya, but for the region and indeed the entire world as well. So as we put the Ethiopian story aside, it's important that we also have the other big story of the day. The Inspector General of Police, Joseph Boinnet, exits office after serving his 4-year tenure. And the former spy says he's proud of having achieved numerous reforms at the National Police Service. Boinnet was appointed to office in December 2014, promising to streamline the service, which at the time was highly perceived to be tainted by corruption and where officers were accused of conducting themselves with impunity. So 4 years down the line, what's his scorecard like? How would Kenyans rate his performance as the Inspector General of Police in the country? Let me bring in our lead reporter, Sophia Wanuna. Sophia, good evening. There are good things and the positive and also positive aspects with respect to Joseph Boinnet that Kenyans have been raising, putting in mind this is his last day as the Inspector General of Police. Who do you have and what perspective do they have of Joseph Boinnet?
Indeed, good evening to you, Linda. So yeah, last day of the Inspector General of Police, Joseph Boinnet. It has been 4 years. The second IG following the Constitution of Kenya 2010 promulgation. So of course, some of the recent developments we've seen around the police service in the country is change of uniform. You'll remember that, the merging or integration, if you like, of the Kenya Police and Administration Police. However, some of the sticky areas, and still with that, I will be speaking with my guests to see what, if at all, any import it has had. But some of the issues that stick out, and he will leave as an issue in as far as securing the country is concerned, is the cattle rustling, the insecurity in northern Kenya. That continues to escalate. It has been a big issue. Many promises have been made and proposals around what needs to be done, but that continues to be a serious concern. And of course, the porous border between Kenya and Somalia that still sees terrorism, Al-Shabaab, a huge threat, and it was just the recent attack at Dusita, some of the areas. And an important one as well, remember the Kenya Police Service rebranded from force to service, but has that paradigm shift happened within the police with the various officers, or do they still conduct themselves with the force and sometimes the brutality that they have been accused of? But to get more perspective, let's speak with a man who's experienced in this field. Simiyu Warunga is the director of the East Africa Institute of Security Studies. Thank you so much, sir, for making time for us. I'll begin on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being horribly poor and 10 excellent, on how you rank Boinnet as he leaves and reasons for why you give him that.
I think 1, let me give him, 3.5. Reasons why is that most of the things that Boinnet took over, that were happening when Boinnet took over, most of them have not been eradicated. We are talking about cattle rustling, we are talking about kidnappings, we are talking about terrorism, although the incidents went down. But we know it's because of the multi-agency framework that the government put in place that actually worked very hard together and smart to ensure that what was the problem before Boinnet took over had been dealt with. So the issue that we didn't have a lot of attacks and a lot of problems on terrorism is because of that act that the government decided to put all these agencies together, form committees, and work together to deal with them. Yeah. So yes, apart from providing some leadership, I think that is 3.5 will do for him. Yes.
Quite poor. I'm sure if he was watching, he'd be like, oh, my world. But I mentioned something around the bringing together integration of the administration and the Kenya police. And there are questions around to what point? Is it efficacy? Is it more security? Is it covering all the bases? To you, has it been of any benefit and help?
One, we need to understand, and I don't speak with competence, but I know there's been a lot of misgivings about that integration process. And I think the story has been that the administration police felt that they were not seriously understood and seriously consulted on how this thing is supposed to be done. Don't forget that this thing was part and parcel of the police reforms. The fact that he only did it when the president came in and gave instructions as the commander-in-chief, that's when we saw this thing happening, speaks volumes about his leadership. Because this was part of the activities that were supposed to have been achieved within the framework of 5 years in the second program of police reforms, which he didn't do until the president came in. So the fact that the president gave instructions and then the minister followed, I think that's how he came in and played a role, because in any case he was the Inspector General. So I don't think it has been achieved well. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. As we speak, we know there are several officers that probably have no offices because of the integration. And remember we were told all officers will continue working because nobody will be taken home. That does not mean that there are no officers who have no offices, but they are still in uniform. That, to me, was a failure on his part, because although the president gave instructions, he should have sat down with his team to ensure that, yes, unless you are using what we were doing during vetting, competence and suitability, you must be competent to occupy a certain position, you must be suitable for that position. So if he was using the two, then there's a likelihood that many of us will be retired. But we are not told why some of them have no officers as we speak.
Right.
Yes.
Talk to me about one of the sticky areas with the police officers, whether it was their welfare concerns. Remember, there was even those who have sought to advance in as far as academics,
Yes.
that would not apply to them being promoted as appeared to have been promised before.
Right.
So remuneration, and also the area around even who qualifies to become a police, the low entry point in terms of grades, and then we expect this amazing work coming out. In terms of that, and perhaps this speaking to what we've seen with him, but also what we expect with the coming IG.
Two things about what you've just spoken. One is about education, self-education, or self-advancement in education. And then two, about the welfare. Police officers have always been encouraged to go back to school. Then the few who have gone back to school using their own money are not being promoted. Yet the policy about that issue is the moment you go back to college, you go back to school, advance yourself, even in the military, it happens.
Yeah.
You are supposed to be given an opportunity for promotion. We know there are processes for you to go through to get the promotion.
Right.
But the fact that you have qualified with a degree, for example, you should be fast-tracked to go through those processes unless you have disciplinary problems that will definitely stop you from moving. That one, and Boinnet is a graduate. He told us he's a graduate, and we saw the papers. So we could not understand how an inspector general, who is a graduate, does not understand what these officers are going through, yet they were promised that when you go back to school, the chances are that you'll be promoted.
Yeah.
Number two, on the welfare issue, Boinnet stood in front of the nation and gave us the figures of how much the officers are going to be paid when they move from barracks. Within 3 weeks, all those figures were reworked on. So how do you expect your officers to behave or to feel when you've promised them this much, you have announced to the country, then within 3 weeks you say, no, it's not 18, we are going to give you 11,000.
Yeah.
So those are some of the poor decisions he was making as an IG that I think as he walks out, many officers will be saying good riddance and hoping that they get a better person who can provide good leadership, good management, and be able to focus on what we need to do to reform our police service.
Yeah. And perhaps some of those remuneration issues, fertile ground for corruption to thrive in the police, that has also been an issue. But talk to me about how Kenya, a country that's supposed to be a country, where law enforcement is what prevails, that we have a wild north, lawlessness is thriving there. And we've seen lots of visits with the ministers, IG, but still that continues. How is that?
On that aspect, let me pick a few areas. Kapedo, very notorious. West Pokot, Turkana borders. But I think that one we don't want to blame IG 100% because that's a political problem. And I'll share with you this. I did some work on behalf of the Senate of this country. I did some research work on the problems of Kapedo, Turkana. The biggest problem we have in that region is about political decisions. And once the political decisions are going to be made, then it will be easy for the police to work out what they need to do. So I don't want to blame that aspect on Boinnet. He works on behalf of the political leadership, and the issues we know is about politics. Yes, there are aspects where he's supposed to arrest people who are perceived to be part of the problem or financing the problem. But I think that thing has two angles that we need to deal with. Once the politicians decide what needs to be done from the highest office in this land, then I'm sure the police will be able to deal with. I'll give you an example. It's a long story, but we used to have problems in West Pokot until President Moi one day decided and told the military, I'm giving you instructions as a commander-in-chief. Go to West Pokot and deal with that problem once and for all. So even those politicians who are thinking they will still be using the political angle to stop the military, they were all swept away because the politicians decided that was the thing to do. And I think that is what we require from this country. Let the political leadership make a decision, allow the police to do their work. So I'll not blame Boinnet on that because this is a recurring problem that has been there through several leaderships of the police.
Yeah. Before we speak about succession and who may be our next IG, our porous borders, I think that's a conversation as a security expert you keep seeing come up. And in terms of personnel and the wall that we've heard about many times and engagement with Somalia, which in itself is trying to stabilize, what can happen? What needs to be done? Or is it a problem we should embrace and perhaps just figure?
We already have a solution. That's why we created the border police, border patrol. It's a police force from the administration police of about 6,000 to 8,000 police officers. The essence of creating that force, because it cannot go across the border, was to ensure that we deploy them across the border strategically, give them all the required equipment, the required facilities to ensure that they deal with our border places so that they can augment the services of the military that is across the border. The reason why Boinnet, until he leaves office, and it was part of the reforms that we had discussed about for years, why he did never do that. Those are some of the things that we say he scores 3%, because that was within him to ensure that this structure that was cleared by the political leadership should have been deployed along the border. And the essence was very clear. Deploy them, but equip them so that they are in tandem with what the military is doing across. So I think it is about poor leadership. It's about lack of foresight. But we have the solution that we already decided as a country. This is what we needed to do. I might not blame him 100%, and I don't speak for him, because some of these decisions about finances, about buying equipment, is also political. But as an IG who has been given the responsibility through the law reform process, he should have deployed these people and started equipping them slowly, because that is a major force of about 8,000 police officers that can easily take care. And then, of course, they get support from the military.
All right. Finally, on succession, we know, and it has appeared to be a pattern as far as the president preference of officers from the intelligence world, as was Boinnet. Right now, speculation is rife around who may take over. Is it one of his two deputies, perhaps the DCI Kinoti, or whoever else? But talk to us about who you expect to, what kind of a person, what should they, kind of qualification, demeanor even. Talk to us about what's important.
Let me use the law, because the law is very clear, the Constitution and the law. The Constitution speaks about Article 10, our values. And many people will not agree with me on this. It says about equitable distribution, regional balance. So to me, the fact that Kinoti is already the chairman of the National Police Service Commission, all these other names that are thinking could be the IG from that region, should not think about that. But that is the law. Number two, the Inspector General is expected to be, one, a strategic thinker, two, a leader, and three, a strategic manager. So we are not looking for a police officer. And that is what most of us did when we went through the police reforms process. We said, let's let the three police officers do their work. That is the DCI, that is the police, and the administration. But get a strategic thinker and manager so that he can strategize on this country can be policed. He can provide strategic management on how the police needs to roll out and do their policing, so that a person who has gone to school well, we are not saying you have to go to school to be a good thinker, but we are just saying add all these 4 or 5 things together, and then pick a person who can show you, how do you call it, SQ leadership. You know, a person you don't have to ask whether this is the Inspector General or not, but he has all those qualifications that we have. We've not seen that. And that is the person we expect, hopefully, that whoever will apply, among the many that are going to apply, we need to pick somebody now who fits those qualities.
Simi Werunga, thank you very much for joining us here on The Big Story. He's the Director, East Africa Institute of Security Studies. A law 3 he gives to the outgoing IG, and I'm sure, Linda, even as you continue the conversation in studio, there will be breaking down to our viewers what that process looks like. When do we expect to have another IG, and what kind of a process will they be taken through? Linda.
Great, Sophia Honuna, thank you so much for speaking to us and indeed for speaking to Simiyu Irunga as well. So in studio we have Tom Kagwe, who's an IPOA board member. He's joining us from our City Center studio. We also have retired Colonel Geoffrey Kingangi, who is a member of Parliament in Mbeere South. He's also a member of the Parliamentary Committee on Security. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us on The Big Story this evening. Mheshimiwa, let me begin with you. Simiyu Irunga gives the outgoing Inspector General 3.5 out of 10. What sort of scorecard would you give him?
Between 6 and 7.
Oh, that would be nice. Why?
Listen, first of all, start where
all right, Mheshimiwa, hold on. I need to fix something with the microphone, but as I wait for the team to fix your microphone, let me cross over to Tom Kagwe, who's an IPOA board member. Sir, what sort of scorecard can you give the outgoing Inspector General?
First, Linda, my term came to an end in May 2018. I'm no longer in IPOA. I speak like an independent citizen.
Okay.
And a researcher.
All right.
In fact, Simiyu Irunga is very generous. He gave him 3.5. I would give him 2.
It goes down. Why would you give him 2?
For very, very serious things which Simiyu has just said. Number 1, on strategic leadership, 0. Ability to curb corruption within police, 0. Ability to prosecute police for human rights violations, including extrajudicial executions, 0. The ability to lead the police within the context of merging the police, 0. Until the president came in. Ability to implement IPOA recommendations, which we gave him for 6 years, at least for 4 years for his office, 0. Ability to implement issues such as, there are many issues. This guy, let him go and rest. It's good riddance.
From you, is there anything positive that he may have done in his tenure as Inspector General from my side?
One thing only. He pushed up the process of ensuring 2 things happen. Number 1, that there will be service standing orders, SSOs. He finished that process at least. The law had provided that the Inspector General should provide SSOs within 12 months. Boinnet failed, but he did. The other thing which I think he did is work with this multi-agency task force on counterterrorism. And yeah, we saw response was better than during Kimayu's time. Other than that, this guy should just go home and rest.
It's interesting that you mentioned that he failed to fight corruption. I mean, that is in the mandate of EACC. What more did you expect him to do with respect to fighting corruption? Because that's a big thing in the country right now.
Linda.
Yes.
I will tell you only one thing. Police is a disciplined service. You don't wait for EACC, DCI to fight corruption with the police. You begin from the top. If he is corrupt, or some people are corrupt within the service, I have been a strategic leader way back in IPOA. I can tell you without any contradiction that IPOA staff are not corrupt. Why? Because I'm not. So if he has a responsibility to fight corruption, it should begin with him. You don't have to wait for another body to come and fight corruption within your own institution. We fought corruption with Macharia Njeru and my fellow colleagues in IPOA. We don't wait for EACC to come and investigate us. If somebody is corrupt, you fire them.
Mheshimiwa, can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, Mheshimiwa, so Simiyu Irunga gave 3.5, Tom Kagwe gives 2. You had said you're giving him 6. Why?
I'll give him 6. And the reason is, and I think my friend Simiu did allude to this, we have to measure the Inspector General not from a policing platform, but from the policy level and the policy implementation. The work of IG is more of policy implementation for policy formulation. So at that platform, then therefore, I would give him a 6. And if you look at the kind of reforms that he has done, one of them being housing and being able to move the police from the barracks to privately hired houses is not a main thing. There's also the question of salaries that has been enhanced during his term. There's also question of mobility, the transportation. It has been enhanced. There's also the question of IC3, Internet, Command, Control, and Communication. We have seen all these, we have a center at the headquarters which monitors through camera the whole city. And it has expanded to, I think, 2 or 3 other cities, including Kisumu and Nakuru. We have seen reforms in the unification of command. And I want to correct, it is not merger, it is unification of command. All we are saying is that at local level, for instance, at Bere sub-county level, instead of having 3 commanders or 3 OCPD and the APS and the DCI fella, you talk to one person and he coordinates the rest. The unification, it's a point that really resonates well down at the machinani level. And finally, I think we have to appreciate the scope and the demands of the new threats, which is actually multinational threats, that the threats have nothing to do with the local grievances, that the threats may not emanate from local situation, and that the threats are actually exported due to globalization.
All right, hold on, Mheshimiwa. I need to take a break on the big story. Stay with me. We'll be back in a couple of minutes just to look at the way forward, the sort of in-tray that lies ahead for the incoming Inspector General and the process as well. What will determine who gets that particular seat? Stay with us on the big story. We'll be back in a couple of minutes.
This is KTN News.